know is I am who I am today.
Absolutely.
Because my parents loved me first. They disciplined me, which got me uncomfortable, but I was comfortable with discipline. And as I got older, that discipline, how did that discipline, I'd like to hear about how your childhood was a little bit, but I also want to understand how that discipline helped you at the U.S. Naval Academy, how it helped you on the football field.
Absolutely, because at first I always resented, like, my parents for not letting me, go to the parties and be able to eat whatever I want. Like, I was the one kid on the other side of town who just didn't get to live like everybody else. And it wasn't until I got my first job and then I went to the Naval Academy and things weren't as hard for me because I already had that discipline. So there were people who were used to partying, used to talking on the phone till this late at night, used to eating whatever they wanted and used to having whatever friends. Like, I now look back and I'm like, good gracious. Like, at first I was giving all the props to my coaches who were doing some of the teaches and teaching and leaning into me.
Yeah.
But a lot of that was my parents just not allowing me to either be soft, right? Like, they would say, no, that's not who you are and that's not what you do. And I know you know better. It wasn't this level of like, oh, he's just a kid or he's let boys be boys. It wasn't all of that. It was, they took an investment in learning exactly who I was and then putting into me what the family culture was, like what we believe in, what are our family virtues, and then disciplining me. They led with love too by being present. I would say that my father, sometimes I would say now, was not as emotionally available. He was working a lot, but it was a mix of him working and his culture, right? Like, that is...
First generation immigrant.
Yeah. He came here from Liberia, West Africa. He played pro soccer, went straight to D.C. After, he hurt his back, met my mom, and then, here I go. But just going back to that, I now realize that him being present and disciplining me and telling me to my face, this is who we are, was his love. Like, all of that was love. And I have him to point back to for that. And I have my mother to point back to for that. If I wouldn't have had that, if I just got to do whatever I wanted, to be honest, I don't think I would have made it to the United States Naval Academy. I'm from Durham, North Carolina. I know you've been around there, and I don't know if you've seen the new Durham, North Carolina with downtown. It was really nice. You can ride your bike.
It's starting to get a little bumpy, but it still has some tougher areas.
Oh, yeah.
It's still, you go off a couple streets, and it's a little different.
Absolutely. And there were times as a kid, I tried to find my way there and rebel a little bit, but because I had strong parents who cared and believed in me and wasn't afraid to tell me who I was and discipline me when I needed it, I have them to thank for today.
It's all about choice.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what we have to teach the next generation, what this generation growing up right now has to start to realize, because they struggle with it as they come into the workforce, is your parents' story is not your story. You have to choose how you receive the information that you've got and what you're going to do with it for the rest of your life. That's a choice. Yeah. And what I look back on is what you're saying is these are the foundational points they made. These are the things that your parents did to kind of almost like the bumper lanes in the bowling alley where they put up the bumpers now so that the kids can bowl. If you just have the bumpers, and the importance of having two bumpers, by the way, versus only one bumper is such an advantage.
Oh, wow.
That's another great advantage because one of my best friends, he's got a single mom, and he was with us last night at the soccer game watching my son, and he comes to all the games and watches my oldest son play and is a big part of my family's life. But he talks about things that I didn't recognize and how powerful they were for him as an ancillary person in our family. So single mom, not a lot of faith-based direction. And he told me that, back in the old days, he loved going to church with me for two reasons. Number one, he loved the community aspect. Like, he loved the way that that everybody was a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
But my mom had a rule that we had to go to mass in the morning on Sunday. If we skipped Saturday night to go out with our friends, we could go at any point in time. In the Catholic Church, you can find one. There is no excuse. There's 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And you can go to any church in the area and they're all going to be similar. And so there's no excuses. So there was no excuses. And the deal was she'd make us a really good brunch or breakfast when we got home. And he said, you know, my love for food and the kitchen and cooking came from your mom. She would make us crepes. And it was, love comes in lots of different forms. Yeah. And it's contagious. It's not something that only you get to witness. So we get to choose. The point I'm getting at is, as I sit with my buddy and we reminisce about our lives, it's not perfect. There were imperfect parts of it. Our parents were imperfect. But the story we chose to remember is the one that makes us stronger. Absolutely. Makes us better. And that's what you're doing. And it, you know, I want to throw some points out here that are really, really important. I love listening to young fathers talk about what it's like and thinking back about what it feels like. And if I were talking to myself, I would remind myself that you think that you have to get to this place. You're always working to get to this next place. And first generation immigrant had me think of this as well. A first generation immigrant believes that they're only here to provide a better life for you. Protect, provide. That's it. Like that's love. Yeah. And that's the fundamentals of love. That is protect and provide is what a father's love starts with, right? And all the other things that we define it today are way more sappy. And I do them and I believe in them. I mean, I constantly, I'm a physical touch person. I hug my kids all the time. Yeah, man. They hate it. My youngest son is not physical touch. He's like, why are you touching me? And I'm like, dude, because I need to touch you to show you I love you. Yeah. My oldest son, I go in and I wrestle with him and I mess around with him. And he feels the same way, but hates it, acts like he hates it. He loves every second of it.
Yeah, you know he does.
We all show love in different ways, but that first generation immigrant, I even call it first generation dad, because there's a lot of dads out there that were not present, or we're alcoholics, or we're bad examples, or we're not the best fathers. And there's way too many of them out there today. You might find yourself as a first-generation father. My dad was what I would call a first-generation father. His dad was not a great example. He was a good man later in life. I love my grandfather, but growing up, my dad and my uncle had a hard life growing up. I always say he was a first-generation father. First-generation fathers, when you're at soccer practice or baseball, or they want you to be great and they want you to have everything they never had, but they're going to also make sure you know that they never had it.
Yeah, they make sure of that part, right?
I mean, how many times did your dad say, do you know what it was like when I was growing up?
You know how many times I have to walk to school in no shoes? Yeah, there's so many stories. Don't even get me started. Yep. They make sure you know.
Yeah, I mean, he played soccer with like a concrete ball.
Yes, like he did it all. He did it all. So yeah, that's true. Like the first generation father, and the way I like to think about it, I heard Kirk Franklin talk about it. For people who don't know, like I ran track first. Of course, I played football, but track is actually my first love. And for some people, the sexy events are, the 100-meter spread, and you get the hurdles. Yeah, my brother actually still runs. He's probably gonna be running in Paris next year. Cool. Or Liberia, which is amazing. But my thing was the 400 and the 4x4. And what I tried to think about is, as our lives continue to progress as fathers, my father was the one who had the baton. He got that baton at first from his father. Well, you would like to think so, right? But he lost his father in Civil War in Liberia. And when he came over here, he never got the chance to really build that relationship and ask him what it was like to be a dad. And, hey, my son is doing this. What should I do? So essentially, that baton was almost dropped. So here my dad is picking up that baton and running his own race, running for his life to try to protect and provide for the son that he now has. And next thing he does, he's doing it the best he can, and he passes me the baton. My job is not to look back at him and tell him all the things he did wrong. You didn't take the curve fast enough. You didn't pass this other guy. Hey, we're not in the lead. If you would have set me up better, maybe we could win this race. That's not my job. My job is to take the baton and run my own race as fast as I possibly can so that I'm able to pass the baton to my son and continue on to do that. But we always have to remember that sometimes the baton might get dropped. Sometimes you might pick up a baton that got dropped in the mud. It might be a little dirty, a little wet, but your job is not to look back. You can build some perspective, right, that to help you run your race better, right? But you're not supposed to look back and say, hey, these are all things you did wrong. I don't need you, and blah, 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 blah. Take the baton and run with it.
Yeah, it's like when you're driving. If you try to drive with only looking through the rearview mirror, you're going to wreck really quickly, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But if you look and you glance back, perspective, you glance right, left, peripheral, and you look forward and go head on, you got that baton. It doesn't matter what's happening, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It works. It works. Does. I mean, it's the thing is, I think we have to remember that it's fun. Life has to be all of life. The hard things, the challenges, the fun. I think the older I get, the more I'm able to deal with the fact that life is going to always be a challenge. There's always going to be things that you're challenged with, and it's not going to be better if you only get here, if you only make this, if you only move here. It doesn't change. You define the parameters of your own life. And when I think about that, I have this perspective. I've tried to do something with my boys that I don't know how it'll pay off. We'll see. But I'm very, very open with them. I'm open with them about money. I'm open with them. My dad and my mom were very blue collar and very, my mom listens to this show all the time. I love my mom. I love my father. I'm very grateful for everything. But I remember, I tell a story in my book about walking home with my dad. He was riding his bike to work because we had one car and my mom had to take it and the car broke down. It was a long story. And it's 102 degrees outside, and we're walking back from the babysitters. My dad is drenched in sweat. I can see it like it was yesterday. I don't know if I was 6, if I was 10. I have no idea. I was probably younger, 5, 8, something like that, because I was home alone a lot by like 11, I think. But the point that I was getting at is I remember just looking at him and wanting to ask, there's got to be a better way. Why are we doing this? Like, I was so curious. And as I got older, and when I wrote that book, the first version of that story was from a place of not understanding, of almost frustration. Like, there had to be a better. And the second version and the second edit was a gratitude for the situation, but still a curiosity of why he wasn't doing something different. The third iteration, and the one that got into the book, was the truth. And that was me working through it in my own brain to remember I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't see that example, if I wasn't challenged to think differently, if I was given everything in a certain way. So with my sons, I tried to express to them that money is just money, that it's not as scary and as challenging. That was something, we had a scarcity mindset growing up, and I come at a total abundance. We had one of the most successful years of our lives as a family financially last year. And my son, I was in the cold plunge, and he comes outside and he asked me a question. By the way, folks, if you're listening to this and you've ever wanted to be honest, you will be honest in a cold plunge.
Yes,
so
that is true.
So I'm in the cold plunge, and he goes, Dad, you said something earlier. You said it was the hardest year of your life. But wasn't it the best year of your life? And I said, if you only define the best year of my life by financial success, it was the best year of my life. But I said, it was the hardest year of my life. There's no question that up to this point, I have not been challenged both personally, professionally, internally, from a faith perspective. Every aspect of my being was transformative last year.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, so I think the lesson is, son, that your most transformative moments come on the other side of major adversity.
Yes, sir.
And so even if it's going to pay off really, really good, you best believe it's going to suck.
Yeah,
absolutely. Getting there.
And it's great that you gave them that perspective too, because when you're younger, you don't get to feel that as much. You don't have those same experiences, right? And you kind of forget that if you don't have the hard, you won't get to the best. And if you've ever lifted weights, I've lifted weights my whole life. I started in high school. If it doesn't hurt, I'm not getting anything out of it. So I would love for my sons to get and understand that perspective. When it's hard right now, lean into it. Like, push through it. Don't stay there. I need you to lean into that. And remember, when you finish, that transformative year, that transformative time, that season that you're in is going to end, and it's going to be great. That's when the best is. Because for kids, they're like, how can it be the best when it was the hardest? They don't think those two equate. They don't think that they could parallel. They don't sound like the same. It was the hardest and it was the best. And it was probably the best because it was the hardest.
If you like clips like this, I have a similar clip here. And if you want to watch the full video, click here.